Well, first, Happy New Year to everyone, and we want to say to all of America that we hope that 2014 brings not just hope and much joy and love, but an opportunity to build on a job, to keep that home, to get your kids to college, and aspire to do everything that we always believe America gives us here and has for quite some time. And so this is going to be a good 2014. We believe it, and as Democrats and as members of Congress, we're going to work really hard to make that the case, and we hope to join with our colleagues on the Republican side to make that the case, that we can prove that Washington can get it and get it done. I want to mention first, of course, the fact that we're celebrating President Johnson's declaration of unconditional war on poverty 50 years ago. When LBJ said that and used the words unconditional war, I think he made it very clear. No longer would we allow Americans to sleep on the streets, have to go to food pantries, or not be able to get health care that they deserved simply because they didn't have income. And while we still have a fight ahead of us, LBJ's words continue to ring true, that we must fight, continue fighting until we win the battle against poverty in America. LBJ believed in Americans. He gave Americans an opportunity, and he let them know that if I can give you this opportunity, I know you'll do the rest. I want to recognize someone who was a former colleague today as well, because she's a fighter and she believes in America, and that's Gabby Giffords, a former colleague from Arizona. This is the anniversary of the day she was gunned down and nearly died in Arizona. She was doing her work as a member of Congress, talking to her constituents. She continues to fight. She believes in America. And so for all those different reasons, whether it's LBJ or Gabby Giffords, we have a reason to believe that we will win this fight against poverty, to give every American a chance. And we want to thank all those Americans who are working very hard to do that. I have good news for so many Americans who are trying to have not just job security, but also health security. Some 9 million Americans today, we can say, don't have to worry about health security. And that's because of the Affordable Care Act and the work that was done by the President and members of Congress back in 2010 to pass the Affordable Care Act. Health security for 9 million Americans who probably didn't have any kind of health security before. 6 million of those have now secure health benefits, whether through the exchanges, the marketplaces that are available throughout the country, or through the Medicaid program. Another 3 million Americans get to continue to stay on their parents' health insurance policy, and so therefore continue their coverage even though they have hit the age of 19, 20, 21, up until they reach the age of 26. 9 million Americans today who a year ago probably could not say that they have health security. But as important it is to talk about the accomplishments of the Affordable Care Act, I want to make sure we mention today that we have a number of Americans, over 1 million Americans, who right now may not be as secure as they'd like to be, for whom 2014 may not be starting out the way they wanted it to. And those are Americans who were working until somewhat recently and now find themselves without a job through no fault of their own. And in fact, not only without a job after searching, but without unemployment insurance benefits as well. When Congress left in December before the holidays, here in the House, our Republican colleagues refused to let us have a vote that we could put on the floor to extend those unemployment insurance benefits that Americans who worked but now are unemployed paid for when they were working. And so we're here to say that we believe that 2014 should start off by giving those Americans the opportunity that LBJ wanted to give, Gabby Giffords wanted to give to our fellow Americans. That is, to give them a chance to fight for themselves. But it's hard to do that when instead of having a chance to get out there and work, they're being told that we're cutting them off at the point when they need it the most, and they're the lowest. LBJ helped us with civil rights. He helped us with Medicare. He put out Job Corps. I happen to be one of the beneficiaries of the youth employment programs that were out there as a teenager. That was the first paying job that I had other than mowing lawns. And it was because of people like LBJ that many of us could say that we had a chance to fight. We had that opportunity. We should give all those Americans who want to work a chance to fight, to get back to where they were. I want to mention just one person, Vincent Bussey, 57-year-old from Northridge, California, not far from where I live. Used to work for B of A, used to do loan modifications for Bank of America, has been unable to work for about a year, has continued to search. He lost his benefits, unemployment insurance benefits, on December the 28th. Mr. Bussey would like to go back to work. He'd like to continue to look for work, but he'd like to be able to do it knowing that he won't have to go to a food pantry or go homeless. We must fight for Americans the way LBJ did. We must fight to make sure that we get this done. It is an emergency, and we should not have politicians hold this up. It's time for us to get this done. And with that, let me now yield to our ranking member from the Ways and Means Committee, who has led this fight to extend unemployment insurance benefits, Sandy Levin, and he will be followed by our colleague from Illinois, Robin Kelly.
Thank you to the chairman of our caucus, and Robin, glad to be here with you. I just want to say a few words and bring home this crisis for 1.4 million Americans. It was 1.3 as of December 28th. Now every week, 72,000 more long-term unemployed are losing their unemployment insurance. So this crisis has begun. This is an anniversary of the war on poverty. The unemployment insurance program kept 11 million people off of poverty since 2008. 11 million. And in 2012, over 2 million. So we have an obligation in this institution not only to look at their and listen to their stories, but I think to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we simply going to let that crisis spread throughout this country? We talked with a lot of people in Michigan during the recess. I want to briefly mention what a few of them said. One from Clinton Township was asked, "What do you plan to do?" And she said, when her benefits were cut off, pray a lot. We need to answer those prayers. Another person said, I just want to stay alive. I just want to keep a roof over my head. And a third person said, he has now begun to make plans, cutting down household costs so there'll be just one meal per day. And I want to close by just urging action in this institution. Harry Reid, and I quote him exactly, said this about our obligation. Certainly for this 3 months, this definitely should not be paid for. If they can come up with they meaning the Republicans, something that's reasonable for a year-long extension, we'll take a look at it. We need to act now. There is this crisis in the households of 1.4 million people.
Robin Kelly, Illinois.
Thank you and Happy New Year. I am honored to be standing here with my colleagues on this very important issue. I'm really going to bring it home. While national unemployment is improving, Illinois unemployment rate of 8.9% is still well above the national average. Unemployment insurance is a critical lifeline for thousands of Illinois families who are working hard to get back on their feet. Almost 82,000 people in Illinois have already lost their unemployment insurance this year. In my district alone, nearly 1,000 people are no longer eligible to receive unemployment insurance. Our economy is still in a state of emergency. When a mom or dad in the Chicagoland area lose their job, the whole family feels it. And again, as was said, unemployment benefits aren't a handout. Americans earn this insurance from their years of work and are losing jobs through a time of recession. They need this extension to navigate a lagging economic recovery. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that not extending unemployment insurance will cost 200,000 jobs this year. On the other hand, extending unemployment insurance can create up to 300,000 jobs. In 2014, we must do better. We need to work together. It's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's not about red or blue states, but it's about Americans and about us all working together. As we head into the 50th year of our war on poverty, it's time to say enough is enough. No child should go to bed hungry. No family should struggle to keep a roof over their heads because of medical expenses. So I urge my colleagues to stand with me to extend unemployment insurance as we fight to win this war. Thank you.
Robin, Sandy, thank you. We'll take some questions.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the precedent for not paying for the unemployment insurance, and that's been cited, certainly by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid yesterday. But if that's what it takes in these circumstances to get a deal to actually affect policy and get what you're aiming for, some sort of a compromise, why not, go for that? I mean, if that's standing away from actually passing.
So let me make sure I understand. Republicans are saying that in order for them to agree to vote to give Americans who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own and right after Christmas lost their last unemployment insurance benefits, that we have to now cut services for children or for seniors or maybe to our soldiers in order to pay for that. When Katrina hit in Louisiana, and we found people desperate to escape the waters and their flooded homes, Republicans and Democrats didn't ask, can those folks pay for that emergency helicopter coming to pick them up? When Superstorm Sandy hit in New York and New Jersey, I don't think Republicans and Democrats who got their homes flooded and watched many of their neighbors die were being asked, can you pay for that emergency service we're about to provide you? Can you pay for that shelter? Or how are we going to pay for it at the federal level before we give those emergency services to those folks in New York and New Jersey and beyond as a result of Superstorm Sandy? And ultimately, we passed a bill that provided all the support that they needed. At the same time, if you watch a pedestrian get hit by a car and you call 911, and they rush an ambulance over to pick that person up and take him to the hospital so you won't see a fellow American die, I don't think we're expecting the ambulance driver to say, can you show us your form of payment before we take you to the hospital? These are emergencies. Well, it's not Superstorm Sandy, but we were hit by an economic superstorm in 2008. And we're still seeing the effects of that economic superstorm where Wall Street caused millions of Americans to lose their homes and their jobs. And so what we're simply saying is we're facing an economic superstorm, and we have an obligation as Americans to help our fellow Americans as we have in the past, as former President George Bush did 5 times in extending benefits without providing for cuts to children and seniors and our soldiers in order to pay for helping an American who, as a result of no fault of his or her own, has lost his job. So if Republicans insist on cutting other people services that they've paid for in order to give Americans in an emergency need to make sure they can go out there and find a job, let them show us what they're willing to use to pay for this. But I don't think we want to start the new year by saying that this is the spirit of America.
Could I just briefly add to this? Javier mentioned this. 5 times this program was extended under President Bush without an offset. 5 times. This is an emergency for 1.4 million people and their families. This is an emergency. This is an economic hurricane for 1.4 million people and 72,000 more every week. And I don't think that in this institution during this 3-month period, we essentially should be caught up in disagreements on this issue of funding while there's this emergency for 1.4 million and growing. We can talk about the longer run, and we need to do that, and how we structure it beyond these 3 months. But this is something that is right present. It's a clear and present danger for these families economically. And this institution, on a bipartisan basis, has to be able to respond and not get caught up in disagreements that essentially penalize 1.4 million people, and it's growing.
Robin, did you have any comment?
I was just struck by the story we heard from the woman yesterday who talked about she really wants to work. She's been trying to find a job and cannot find a job, and saying how she has to turn her temperature down to 58 and still wear a coat and hat in her home because that's what she has to do to be able to afford to pay the bills. And I live in the Chicagoland area where it's freezing, and as I just said, we have 1,000 families in Illinois and so many in my district. Is this what we want people to go to? Where's the humanity in that? And also, if they don't have money coming in, they will have no money to spend out, which will affect economic development as well. It's like throwing a pebble in the water. It's going to reverberate, but we need to care about those 1.4 million people.
Take probably one more question because we have to run to another one.
I'll try and sneak in two together.
That won't be the first time.
No, look, just two. The first question is the war on poverty. We've seen some senior Republicans now saying they too are launching their own war on poverty. They have a different approach. I want your comments on what we've seen, what we hear from Senator Rubio today. Republicans who say they also want poverty to end. And then second, we've seen one pay for in the last day proposed by Republicans for UI. Senate Republicans are saying, let's decrease benefits that illegal immigrants are using.
The children.
Yes, exactly. And so response on that, and then the Republicans' war on poverty today.
Well, we're holding you up for a press conference on the war on poverty. So, and we promised Barbara and others that we would be brief. So, if you don't mind, hold the question. But we have some deep feelings about poverty. And by the way, I want to reiterate, unemployment insurance has kept 11 million plus people out of poverty since 2008. That should be enough reason for us to act. And Senator Ayot's proposal essentially would mean that a lot of kids would not be covered in reality. And I don't think we want that kind of a trade-off. And I just want to, maybe we close with this. In terms of the long run, we can sit down and discuss how we handle it. I want to emphasize in 2012, we made some reforms in unemployment insurance. We cut down the number of benefits from 99. The top now is 73, and the average is 54. We also gave the states more ability to undertake training programs and retraining programs, and also in terms of compensation. If there was a sharing of work, there's 100% funding to the states when they do that kind of a program. So we can have further discussions about changes and reforms, but not during this immense immediate emergency for these families. And we surely don't want essentially to trade off benefits for kids for unemployment insurance. That is not a deal that this institution should be discussing. I guess with this, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, one more.
I'm just going to go ahead and close it, but I want to thank Robin and Sandy, Congresswoman Kelly, and Ranking Member Levin for joining me. I just want to respond quickly to say that we welcome any member of Congress who is interested in tackling the war on poverty, genuinely tackling the war on poverty, not giving tax breaks to wealthy corporations and hope that it trickles down to those who are fighting to be able to live another day. But really, if they're genuinely interested, we're ready to lock arms with them and work together. And finally, I want to emphasize what the ranking member said. We need to help millions of Americans who are trying to hold on to their job. And if the best that some people can do is tell us that we have to make cuts to services to kids and to assistance to kids, regardless of how you categorize them. I got 3 daughters. I don't care what you call them, so long as you call them my daughters. I don't think that's the way America wants to start 2014. It used to work a lot, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this bugaboo about immigrants. I don't think Americans buy that anymore. I don't think Americans are willing to say that a child who's an immigrant should be treated as less of a human being simply because she's an immigrant. And therefore we can take away the things that their parents have worked hard for them, because these are working parents. Otherwise they wouldn't qualify to get these credits. And so I think it's a shame that we see that children are being used as pawns here in this political game when we've got over 1 million Americans who are saying, hey, I just want to get back to work and do what we've always done in the past. And if the Republicans who voted to give George Bush the unemployment insurance extensions that he requested 5 times, those Republican members who still are in this chamber, when they voted with George Bush to extend those benefits without paying for them, are willing to do what they did for George Bush, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. And I will conclude by saying this one thing, for those who understand this saying in Spanish, because it goes right to the heart of this issue about immigrant children and immigrants. Dime con quién andas y te diré con quién eres. Here in Washington, D.C., I hope those who understood Spanish understand you better watch closely, because when politicians talk about wanting to be with you or against you, watch their actions, don't listen to their words. When you look at those politicians, I ask you to ask yourself, dime con quién andas, y entonces yo te diré quién eres. With that, we'll close and move on. Thank you and have a good 2014.